Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Happy Valentine's Day. I probably don't even need to say it, but you are all my Valentines. I love you guys so much. Be my Valentine. Seriously, I love you guys. I really do appreciate you. Thank you for being my partners in the Word, friends in the Word. I guess that's the best kind of friend, right? We have been together, some of us, for so long now, just going verse by verse through the Word of God, and we are finishing up the book of Leviticus, y'all. We are finishing up the book of Leviticus. I am enjoying it. I'm also enjoying the fact that we're almost done with it. Leviticus is kind of hard. Today's chapters are not hard in the sense that I read them, understand them, but I don't have a lot of devotional thoughts. These are instructions for the priests, and let's talk about it because I think there's some good stuff. But like I say, probably not gonna have my grandma embroider one of these verses and frame it and put them on my wall. Hobby Lobby don't have any of these verses in their art section. But anyway, let's talk about it. We've been in the holiness code now for several days, and we've been looking at instructions for just ordinary Israelites, ordinary lay people. Their responsibility to keep themselves holy for God is very significant, but there is a higher standard for the priest. And these two chapters, chapters 21 and 22, underline the importance of the priests and the higher standard at which they are held because they are made holy by God and they serve at his altar. These two chapters absolutely go together. They're just one unit, you may even say. You could take the two chapters together and divide them into 6 sections, and each of those sections is sort of marked by the repetition of that phrase, I am the Lord, your sanctifier. You just find it at the end of verse 8, I am the Lord, I am holy, and I make you holy. Verse 15, I am the Lord who makes him holy. Verse 23, I am the Lord who makes him holy. So again, I am the Lord, the sanctifier, and the Lord who makes him holy. You'll see it 3 times in chapter 21, 3 times in chapter 22, and that designates the different sections. That's how the material is organized. Now, on that, it really is just very, very what's the word? Just formally organized. It's very simple to follow. That first section, verses 1 to 9, are the restrictions on mourning and marriage for ordinary priests. And then verses 10 to 15 are the restrictions on mourning and marriage for the high priest. Essentially, the Old Testament priests ain't going to preach your funeral. They were not doing funeral duties. We're talking about burial arrangements here, which were always the family's responsibility. It's interesting because in our culture, we don't even think of that. Families don't have to. Yeah, you got to go to the funeral home and make arrangements, but you're not going to touch a dead body probably. But in the ancient world, it was the family's responsibility, and someone has to physically handle the body, prepare it for burial, and put it in the ground. But if it's in a priest family, the priest is not going to be the one to do it. With very, very few exceptions. The only exceptions are closest relatives, mother, father, son, daughter, brother, his virgin sister. In other words, she's not married and she still depends on him because she doesn't have a husband. But a priest may not defile himself and make himself unclean for someone who's related to him only by marriage. So he ain't going to be doing his, brother-in-law's funeral. You'll notice here that the wife is not mentioned, but she's definitely a priest would be ordinarily permitted to attend to his wife's burial. She's one flesh with him. And so not to do so would be shocking. I believe when we read Ezekiel together, wasn't Ezekiel commanded not to mourn, not to tend to the burial of his wife? And that was a shocking kind of commandment. Ordinarily, a priest is one flesh with his wife, and therefore he would be permitted to attend to her burial. Now, the high priest in verses 10 to 15, it's similar, but again, once more, an even higher standard. He must never leave his hair uncombed or tear his clothing. Those are ordinary signs of mourning and grieving, but the high priest is not permitted to do that. He may not make himself similarly unclean, even for his father or mother. He must not defile the sanctuary of his God by leaving it to attend to a dead person, for he's been made holy. So in other words, if the priest is about his priestly duties, the high priest, he's not permitted to leave for any purpose whatsoever, including the death of his own mama. You know, I just think this is really interesting because it stresses the way in which your priestly duties come before your family duties. Just as a minister, I'm conflicted with this. Part of me, in Leviticus, I love that. It's like, yes, you know, the work of the Lord comes first. But in my own ministry, you know, so often the church, my friends, fellow pastors, even sometimes I give, you know, to younger pastors the counsel of, you know, hey, don't sacrifice your family for the sake of your ministry. You know, I've said that, and I've said, you know, if I fail, you know, my son, I'm the only father he's got, you know, but he's got a pastor, you know. If this church, you know, if I fail this church, they'll replace me in a week. You'll have another pastor sitting at this desk. But if I fail my family, there's no one to take my place. You know, I've always sort of understood and stressed that family duties, you know, come first. I'm first called to my wife, my son, my family. But I'm a little conflicted about that. I'll be honest with you. I think I've been a good dad. I think I'm a very, very devoted husband. I cook supper every night, y'all. But I just know that, you know, for military folks, for example, whatever sacrifices their families make for the sake of the nation, people like, you know, yeah, you know, I thank you for your service, you know, and military wives and families, they say goodbye to their dads and they don't see them for months. And we've got guys in our church right now that are deployed. God bless them. I honor and appreciate their service. But I'm conflicted because obviously there are certain categories of work and sacrifice that we believe is worthy and might come above family. But in most of our minds, church ministry is not one of those. And like I say, I'm a little conflicted about that. You know, I just am. Because part of me feels like, you know, my devotion to God, my calling to God, that he comes first. I mean, did not Jesus say you got to hate your mother, your father? He wasn't saying literally hate, but he was saying you got to love God first. You love him first. Anyway, that's just me rambling, y'all. I don't have any answers to that. That's just my personal turmoil there. I'm always a little conflicted over how to balance or prioritize ministry duties with family duties. Clearly, in the book of Leviticus, priestly duties came before the family duties for the priests, with very, very few exceptions. Following from that, verses 16 to 24 in chapter 21, there are physical impediments to the priest exercising his office. If something happens, if he goes blind or lame or otherwise disfigured or deformed, if he breaks his foot or breaks his arm, if he goes hunchback or dwarfed, if he gets a lazy eye or psoriasis, scabs, damaged testicles. I mean, my goodness, these priests, what are they doing? That's a dangerous life. But if any of those things happen, they're not permitted to approach the altar. Again, once more, spiritual holiness in Leviticus is very much connected to physical wholeness. And so if you become physically in any way unwell, unwhole, then you must not approach the altar of God. Now, the interesting part about this is what follows in chapter 22, when it talks about the way chapter 22 ends. I think it's kind of funny because we're given instructions to priests, but we end up with physical impediments for using animals for sacrifice. Some people say, well, does that belong here? Well, the priest is the one who presents the animal ultimately. And so he's in charge of quality control. You know, don't let somebody bring a 3-legged goat. You know, don't let somebody bring, some weirdo ram and try to pass it off like something that's worthy of God's sacrifice. So the priest is the one who is, sort of vetting the sacrificial animals. But interestingly, all the same impediments that keep a priest from offering a sacrifice are the same physical impediments that would make an animal unfit for sacrifice. Some people have read into that and would say that in a biblical context, the sacrificial animals are the priest. I'm putting that in quotes. If you're just listening to me, I'm using air quotes. The priest, the sacrificial animals function as the priest of the animal world. I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but I think it's interesting. There's a kind of parallel here. The animal must be as physically whole as the priest who offers it. I think that's kind of interesting. Also, when it comes to sacrificial animals, notice the regulations about which animals, as far as you can't offer a mother and her offspring on the same day. Just even when you're sacrificing animals to God, there's a sense in which there's a respect for creation and respect for reproduction and new life, and I just think that's really kind of interesting. That's a common thread in the Old Testament. And I think it's beautiful. Anyway, chapter 22 is mostly about who can and who cannot eat at the priest's table. Obviously, the priests didn't have another day job. They don't have other income. So the food that they bring home from work, the food that's been offered to God is sacred, but it is what's at the priest's table. So just not everybody can eat that. And it really boils down to the priest's closest family. And it makes those exceptions there pretty clear, which relatives have right to the priestly food and so forth. So anyway, that's chapters 21 and 22. The festivals is the next discussion, and I love that, the appointed festivals. So we'll pick up on Monday morning with chapter 23. It's 44 verses, so we'll just do one chapter, okay? Chapter 23 for Monday. Listen, have a great weekend. I am continuing my sermon series called The Coat of Many Troubles, The Life of Joseph. Started last week, continued this week in the Woodburn pulpit, 8, 9, 30, and 11. I hope you'll join us. I love you guys so much. Again, happy Valentine's Day. Happy Friday. The sun is shining. Where's the sun been? We've had the grayest, rainiest, blessed days for all week, it seems. The sunshine is beautiful today. So go outside, get some vitamin D today. Stay in the Word, and I'll see you Monday morning, 10 o'clock for 10 with Tim. I love you guys. Have a good Friday.